Okay, you've definitely seen this book before, right? On a bookshelf, in a doctor's office, maybe even tucked away in your parents' house. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on a true cultural phenomenon, chicken soup for the soul. But here's the crazy part. Before it became this global bestseller, it faced an absolute tidal wave of rejection. And I'm not talking about a few no's. We're talking more than 140 publishers. 140 said pass on this book. Just let that sink in for a second. So that's the big question, isn't it? How on earth did a book that almost nobody wanted to publish become one of the most successful book series of all time? Well, that's what we're here to figure out. Let's get into it. All right, let's rewind to 1993. You've got two guys, Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen. They had this idea that, on the surface, seemed pretty simple, but underneath, it was incredibly powerful. It wasn't a novel, and it wasn't your typical self-help guide. It was something totally different, something people didn't even know they were craving. And the title? It's the perfect metaphor for the whole concept. You know, just like chicken soup is that classic comfort food when you're sick, this book was designed to be a remedy for the spirit. It's a collection of bite-sized emotional nourishment that you could turn to whenever you needed a little lift. So, what was the secret sauce here? Well, it wasn't magic. It was actually a simple but brilliant formula. And it all came down to a few key ingredients that tapped into a really universal human need. First up, the core philosophy. The entire project was built on this one simple, powerful idea. Sharing and reading real-life stories helps us feel less alone, you know? It's like a direct line to empathy and hope, reminding us that we're all kind of in this together, navigating the same highs and lows. So this formula, it had 3 parts that just worked perfectly together. First, it was an anthology, which meant you could just pick it up, open to any page, and read a complete story in a few minutes. No big commitment. Second, the stories were crowdsourced. They came from regular people, not famous authors, which gave them this incredible, raw authenticity. And finally, every single story was picked for one main reason. It had to make you feel something. But listen, a formula is only as good as its ingredients, right? So what were these stories actually about? Because that's where the real magic is. The book is made up of what they call true vignettes. Really, they're just short, real-life snapshots with a little nugget of wisdom inside. And they all revolved around these big, universal themes that literally anyone can relate to. You know, love, loss, kindness, and just plain old perseverance. You'd get these powerful stories of mentorship. You know, that one moment where a teacher or a coach looks at a struggling kid and says, "I see something in you." It's such a potent reminder of how one person's belief can completely change the course of someone else's life. And then you had all these stories about the ripple effect of kindness, just these small, seemingly tiny acts, a kind word to a cashier, letting someone merge in traffic, that ended up turning someone's entire day around, and maybe even their whole outlook on humanity. And of course, there were the stories of resilience. Honestly, these were often the most moving. They featured people facing unbelievable hardship, illness, grief, failure, who not only get through it, but manage to turn that struggle into a source of strength. I mean, that's the ultimate message of hope, isn't it? And if you actually look at the breakdown of the very first book, you can see the strategy crystal clear. It's a mosaic of the human experience, with huge chunks dedicated to overcoming obstacles, love, and parenting. These aren't niche topics, right? This is the core stuff of life, which is exactly why it hit home for so many people. But look, the story doesn't just stop with one successful book. Not even close. Its success was so huge that it ballooned into something much, much bigger. It became a whole movement that really changed the game for inspirational media. The impact was just staggering. This one book exploded into a mega franchise with hundreds of different versions for teens, for pet lovers, for nurses. You name it, there's probably a chicken soup book for it. But even more than that, it normalized using personal stories as a tool for connection in schools, in therapy, even in corporate leadership. It really created a shared language for talking about things like empathy and kindness. Now, to be fair, we gotta look at the whole picture. Its legacy is undeniable. It proved there was a massive market for positive content, and it sent the message that everyone's story matters. But at the same time, it's definitely been criticized for being, a little overly sentimental or cheesy. The stories are meant to inspire, not to be fact-checked journalism. And there's a huge bias toward happy endings. Real life, as we all know, is a lot messier. But I think when you boil it all down,
The lasting legacy of Chicken Soup for the Soul is this simple, powerful, and timeless reminder that everybody has a story. And it's in sharing those stories that we find out we're not so different after all.
And that really just leaves us with one last question to think about. In a world that is just so full of noise, what stories truly matter? What's the one story you have that's worth sharing?